To call The Atlantic a far-left publication is an understatement. They're openly socialist, borderlining on communism, so take that into account while we read the following article, because they're talking about a research which was done recently discussing the concept of fertility. So they're pointing out how in many first world nations, like South Korea, for example, the fertility rate is dropping significantly, which is around 0.78 children per woman. Now, apparently in America, the rates are indifferent, and they basically talk about how this is an issue for many governments, and they're trying to find various ways to fix it. One of the ways that governments are trying to fix this is by giving money to people. And this study is trying to see whether or not that is working. So apparently they were shocked when finding out that men staying home doesn't necessarily raise fertility. I don't even know why they would think it would. I don't even know why they think that wealth increases fertility, because you notice how university professors and doctors and other educated people usually have few children. Meanwhile, you go to the rural area and even in places where people are impoverished, and they have 6 or 7 children. I mean, think about the medieval time period and think about how poor people were back then, and yet they had large, numerous families. So, if anything, the opposite is true. When people have less money, when they have less things, they have more kids, and when they're educated and they're better off, they have 1, maybe 2 kids. I mean, look at the celebrities in Hollywood. How many of them have 8 or 9 children? Like, it's stupid to believe that rich people have more kids, or that if the father stays at home, then the fertility rate increases. What they're probably trying to test is if the solution from some more right-wing governments, as they would call it, for instance, Hungary, to give money to people who decide to have families. So, for example, you get tax cuts if you're freshly married, or children get allowances, right? So that is not making people richer. That is paying people to have kids. It's a huge difference, right? So their test with whether or not someone wins the lottery wouldn't apply here, because someone who wins the lottery gets the money regardless of whether or not they choose to have kids. However, what they found is very interesting, and you'll have to bear with me for a bit. Now, apparently, they tried to assess whether or not someone making money is going to have a higher fertility, and this was a difficult thing to experiment, because how can you find people in society who are poor and all of a sudden got rich? So they decided to go after people who won the lottery. Large random transfers of wealth is very significant, because when you win the lottery, you get a lot of money. You may buy a new car, a house, pay off some debts, but you can also use your new wealth to establish a better work balance, hire a cleaning service or a nanny, or cut back on the work hours. A team of economists studying a large pool of lottery players in Sweden found that when men win the lottery, they become a lot likelier than demographically similar lottery losers to get married if they were lower income and unmarried before their win, and they have more children. On its face, this supports the work-life balance idea, but when women win the lottery, the only big change in their behavior is divorce. Divorce rates for women almost double in the first couple of years after winning the lottery. Take into account that this was done in Sweden, and in Sweden, the law says that if one spouse has wealth, right? So, for example, Sweden allows lottery winners to hold on to most of their winnings, right? So maybe this is why you have the higher rate of divorce, because it's also applied to that particular culture. But they usually found out that, for example, women who are married with older people, they tend to divorce. And I'm like, well, no shit. You know, you look at George Soros. I mean, George Soros looks like an individual that can be my great-great-grandfather. However, he is married with a ushi-kushi, very young woman. There's no way you can tell me that they're married out of law. I mean, you can tell me, but I won't believe it, right? So if that lady all of a sudden wins the lottery and ends up having like $50 million jackpot, I don't think that it would be surprising if she were to file for a divorce, right? Because there are people who do marry elderly men, and I'm not talking like about daddy syndrome. I'm talking about great grandfather syndrome. They do marry in the expectation that they're going to win the lottery in a different way. For example, Game of Thrones treats this subject very well with Walder Frey and his young wives. So this wouldn't surprise me if it increases the divorce rates. Then you also have other women who, for example, apparently the poorer they are, the more likely they are to divorce, who all of a sudden think that they deserve better because, well, they out-earned their husband with the lottery winning, right? They're millionaires, their husbands aren't, and they're like, well, why can't I marry another millionaire? So I kind of understand this. Meanwhile, for the men who are single, right, because this is what the study shows, it shows that men who are single, they are more likely to get married, and this is because their social status goes up. Like, all of a sudden, they can afford trips to expensive places, they can afford to drive an expensive car, and this raises the value of men. The value, when it comes to dating for women, isn't wealth. Like, I don't know any friend of mine that's a man and is like, well, I just want to marry a rich woman. Maybe those people exist, but I think they're very rare, because most people are like, no, I want to marry the 18-year-old supermodel with big tits. Okay, you know, that's what people desire, and whether or not she wins the lottery is secondary to that aspect. So this is probably the main reason why men are more likely to get married after winning the lottery. Their value increases. Meanwhile, women, probably their expectation increases, because they're like, well, why am I married with this poor individual, with this poor guy? I'm pretty sure, like, winning the lottery can cause a lot of arguments and fights within the family as well. It's quite possible that the man also feels emasculated, like all of a sudden his wife is a millionaire and, you know, he feels insecure because, like, well, I work for a living, you just happen to get lucky. So that can lead to a lot of scandals, which can, of course, lead to divorce. But what I found interesting, right, is that despite the fact that the study shows that when men make more money, fertility rate goes up, and they say it out loud here. First, it suggests that a core part of low fertility is how people value potential partners. Women continue to report desiring much higher earning partners, and when men suddenly have more money, they do in fact get married more, right? So this is what they found. And their first conclusion is policymakers cannot and should not solve this by simply handing out man bonuses. Fascinating, isn't it? Like, you just found the solution in the study. I'm not the one claiming it. But, like, the study found it out. And why not? Like, don't you have, like, equity initiatives and, you know, affirmative action and other stuff? So, basically, if a government would want to solve the fertility problem, this would actually be the solution which you found. Pay me more. Or, you know, give them welfare, give them various programs like assistances in order for them to be able to get married. Like, clearly men want to get married, and women desire much higher earning partners. Like, you found it out within this. The Atlantic, far left rag is literally stating this. And you're like, well, the solution shouldn't be to give more men more money. Like, why not? I'm not for socialism, by the way. I'm not saying that this should be the I don't think anyone should get money. Period. Right? But why not? Like, if then you also have, like, the American way of child support. Like, that's an interesting, different way of increasing fertility. So, for example, if the system always gives the child to the mother, and whenever the mother has a child with a father, she gets money from him through child support, then a woman having 4 children with 4 different fathers, well, all of a sudden, right, that increases fertility. Then she gets more money. That can be another way. But I'm interested that the Atlantic doesn't talk about it. So they don't really give a solution. They're like, okay, well, we find out that this works, but you shouldn't do it. Okay, good to know. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.